I never thought I'd end up working the night shift at an amusement park that hadn't seen a real customer in almost 20 years. The place wasn't on any map anymore, and most people around town swore it had been demolished. But when I first walked through the rusted gates, I realized the rumors were lies. The park was still standing, buried in weeds and silence, like a corpse left to rot in plain sight. The rides loomed against the night sky, skeletal silhouettes that looked more like gravestones than attractions. The Ferris wheel was still intact, but its seats swayed gently, as though passengers were still riding, weightless in the breeze. I couldn't tell if it was the wind moving them or something else. I didn't take the job because I wanted to. I took it because I needed money, desperately. Rent was overdue. Bills had stacked up, and after months of dead-end applications, this was the only gig left that didn't ask too many questions. The posting had been vague. Night security needed. Must not scare easily. $30 cash. It almost sounded like a prank. Almost. Until I called, and someone answered. The voice on the other end gave me an address and told me to show up at sundown. No interview, no paperwork. Just come prepared to walk the grounds from dusk until dawn. That was it. It should have set off alarms in my head, but instead, it felt like relief. All I had to do was stay awake, walk around some old rides, and collect an envelope at the end of each week. Easy, or so I thought. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not rust, but something sweeter. The faint, cloying scent of cotton candy, like the machines had only just been shut off. I tried to laugh it off. Phantom smells, right? But the sweetness lingered, clinging to my throat, making me feel like I'd stepped into a memory that wasn't mine. The second thing I noticed was the silence. Amusement parks were supposed to be alive with sound screams, laughter, music drifting through the air. Here, the silence was so complete, it pressed against my ear. Every step I took on the cracked pavement echoed too loudly, as if the park was amplifying my presence, watching me. The attractions were frozen mid-celebration. A carousel stood half-covered in a tarp, its horses locked in a gallop that would never end. Their painted eyes were cracked and faded, but I couldn't shake the feeling they were following me. The game booths still had prizes, water-stained teddy bears, cheap plastic trinkets, all waiting for hands that would never come. And yet, here and there, signs of life clung stubbornly to the ruins. A balloon tied to a bench post, swaying like a child had just left it. Popcorn scattered along the midway, though the machines were long gone. Once, as I passed the tilt-whirl, I heard the faint scrape of metal like the cars shifting under unseen weight. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hand. The sound stopped, but the air felt heavier, thicker, as though I'd walked into a room where someone had just been talking and had gone silent when I entered. I told myself the job was just a job. Old parks made noises, steel shifted, animals moved through the grounds. Nothing to be afraid of, and yet, my gut wouldn't let go of the unease. The deeper I walked, the stronger it grew. There's something wrong here. Something waiting. I didn't know it then, but my first night was only the beginning, and soon I would learn the rules. The man who hired me was waiting just inside the park office, a squat building near the front gates with peeling paint and a flickering light above the door. He looked older than the place itself, skin tanned, like old leather, eyes sunk deep, uniform that hadn't been washed in years. He introduced himself only as Miller, though he never offered a first name. "You showed up," he said, his voice low and scratchy, like he didn't talk much anymore. He didn't smile, didn't shake my hand, just gestured toward a chair. "Sit. We don't have long before your shift starts." The office was bare except for a desk, a battered filing cabinet, and a corkboard covered in yellowed papers. On the desk lay an old thermos and a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. "This place has rules," Miller said. "You follow them, you'll make it through the night." You break them, he trailed off, staring at me until the silence grew unbearable. Then he tapped the paper with one finger. Read them. Memorize them. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. I unfolded the paper, expecting something ordinary. Instead, I found a list scrawled in uneven handwriting, the kind of thing that looked copied over too many times. Smudges of ink trailing into the margins. The rules read, do not ride the attractions, no matter how tempting, no matter what you hear. If you hear music, find the source. If it's the carousel, count the horses. If one is missing, leave the area immediately. Do not answer if someone calls your name after midnight. No one here should know you. Patrol the midway first, then the rides, then the outer fence. Always in that order. Do not break it. If you see lights on the Ferris wheel, do not look directly at them. Keep walking. At 3 a.m., return to the office. Lock the door. Do not open it until 3:15. No matter what you hear outside. When dawn comes, wait for the whistle. Only then can you leave. My throat went dry as I read. The words looked absurd, like a campfire ghost story passed off as policy. But Miller was watching me, his expression flat, waiting for my reaction. These rules are a joke, right? I asked. Miller didn't blink. Do I look like I'm joking? The silence stretched, and I realized he wasn't the type to waste breath. I nodded, pretending I understood. Inside, I thought about the money, about how ridiculous this all was. Rules about lights and music. It felt like hazing, some initiation for gullible night guards. But Miller's eyes, they weren't the eyes of a prankster. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Someone who didn't expect me to believe him only to obey. You follow them? He said finally, sliding the paper back toward me. Every night. No exceptions. The park doesn't forgive mistakes. I slipped the paper into my jacket pocket. Suddenly, unwilling to let it out of my sight, Miller stood, moving toward the door. Your shift starts now. Stick to the patrol route. I'll be here until morning, but don't come back unless the rules say so. And then he was gone, his heavy boots echoing down the hall until the sound faded. I sat alone in the office for a moment, staring at the flickering bulb above me. The rules felt heavy in my pocket, their presence more unsettling than comforting. I told myself they were nonsense, but a part of me, the part that noticed the balloon on the bench, the sway of empty seats, wondered if nonsense could still be dangerous. When I finally stepped outside, the night had deepened. The midway stretched before me like a road into another world. I started walking, flashlight beam cutting across cracked pavement and shadows that seemed too long, too sharp. The rides loomed closer now, hulking shapes in the dark. My boots crunched over scattered trash, wrappers that hadn't decayed, soda cups that looked recently dropped. It was impossible. This place had been abandoned for decades, and yet a faint noise drifted through the air. Not loud, not clear. Just a whisper of melody, like a music box winding itself up. I froze, the rules flaring in my mind. If you hear music, find the source. If it's the carousel, count the horses. My throat tightened. I didn't even know where the carousel was, not exactly, but the sound seemed to float from the left, weaving between the booths. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the wind, a rusted speaker giving out its last breath. Still, I turned toward it, and as I walked, the smell returned, the cotton candy sweetness, thicker now, clogging the back of my throat. I swallowed hard, telling myself this was just atmosphere, the way old places held on to memories. But the melody grew sharper, clearer. I reached the carousel at last, the tarp half pulled back. My flashlight beams swept over the horses, their chipped paint glistening under dew. I counted them slowly. Heart THUDDING. 1, 2, 3, 4. The music grew louder. 5, 6, 7. The carousel creaked, wood shifting under the tarp. 8, 9. I stopped. One was missing. The music snapped off. leaving only silence. The missing horse shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. Maybe the carousel had been dismantled, scavenged for parts years ago. Maybe the missing horse had simply rotted away. I told myself all of that as I stood there, flashlight beam trembling against the chipped paint of the animals that remained. But the silence pressed down, thicker than before, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was nearby, watching. I remembered the rule. If it's the carousel, count the horses. If one is missing, leave the area immediately. I should have listened, should have turned on my heel and left the moment I realized the count was wrong. But instead, I lingered. I leaned closer to the carousel, brushing the tarp aside to get a better look. My brain kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Rust, vandalism, time, something normal. That's when I heard it. A sound like hooves against wood, slow, deliberate, as though one of the horses had taken a step. When I wasn't looking, I froze, my breath catching in my chest. My flashlight beam quivered across the painted figures. None of them had moved. They couldn't have. They were bolted down, but the sound came again, this time closer. I backed up, heart hammering. My light darted across the platform, over the peeling gold trim and warped mirrors. Nothing moved, yet the faint scent of sawdust and fresh paint filled the air, as if the carousel had just been built. That was the moment I broke the rule. I didn't leave. I stayed. I kept watching, waiting for proof of what I'd heard. I wanted to be sure. Needed to be sure. The tarp shifted behind me, a soft rustle like something slipping beneath it. I spun, the beam catching a shadow that darted just out of sight. My chest tightened, lungs refusing to pull in enough air. And then, for the briefest instant, I saw it. A horse that hadn't been there before. Its paint was fresh, gleaming under my light, mouth curled in a wide, unnatural grin. Unlike the others, its eyes weren't glassy or chipped. They were wet, reflective, alive. It stared at me. The music snapped back on without warning, loud and jarring, the carousel lurching as though invisible riders had climbed aboard. The platform groaned, mirrors rattling. The painted horses strained against their poles, hooves grinding against wood. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get as far away from this ride as possible. But my legs locked, caught between disbelief and terror. The new horse shifted, just slightly. Its head tilted, following me. That was enough. I turned and bolted, sprinting across the midway until the music cut off behind me. My chest burned, each breath ragged, as I forced myself not to look back. When I finally stopped, doubled over near the game booths, the silence had returned, heavy, watchful. I pulled the paper from my pocket, the rules now shaking in my hands. My eyes locked on the line. If one is missing, leave the area immediately. I hadn't left. I'd waited. I'd looked, and the park had noticed. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at those words, but a realization settled over me like ice. These weren't suggestions. They weren't part of some elaborate prank. They were survival instructions. I slid the paper back into my jacket, hands trembling, and forced myself to keep walking the patrol route. The midway stretched ahead, the rides looming larger than before, each one a possible trap. I tried to steady my breathing, but the rules had burned themselves into my brain. Follow them, or risk becoming part of the park. And though I kept moving, one thought haunted me with every step. The horse had looked real. Too real. What if it hadn't just appeared? What if it had been waiting all along? The midway felt endless after the carousel. Every booth looked the same in my flashlight beam-stripped signs, water-stained prizes, counters warped by years of weather. Yet I couldn't shake the sensation that each stand was watching me pass. Silent merchants waiting for me to play their games. I tried to focus on the patrol route Miller had drilled into me. Midway first, then the rides, then the fence. Stick to the order. Don't stray. The paper crinkled in my pocket every time I moved, a constant reminder of how close I'd already come to breaking everything. My boots scuffed along the pavement, echoing too loud in the stillness. And then I heard it. A voice, soft at first, drifting across the empty midway. My name. It wasn't Miller. The voice was too young, too light, like a child calling for a parent. It came from somewhere near the dunk tank, a hulking frame of rust and peeling blue paint. I froze. The rule seared across my mind. Do not answer if someone calls your name after midnight. No one here should know you. The logical part of me screamed that it couldn't be real. No one knew I was here. No one alive, anyway. But the voice came again, clearer this time, drawing out my name with a sweetness that curdled in my stomach. Come on, it whispered. Just answer. My throat tightened. I gripped the flashlight so hard, my knuckles ached. The urge to respond, to shout back, to prove it was just some echo or prank gnawed at me. My mouth opened before I realized it, and then I caught myself. Teeth clamped shut. The air shifted instantly, colder, heavier. The voice fell silent. For a moment, I thought it had worked, that I'd beaten whatever game the park was playing, but the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like disappointment. Something moved behind the dunk tank. A sliver of shadow slid along the cracked pavement, too quick for me to follow with the light. My chest seized. Almost had you, the voice hissed. So close to my ear I flinched and spun. No one was there. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. My pulse hammered in my throat, each beat telling me I'd come within inches of breaking the second rule, inches from finding out what would have happened if I answered. The game booths around me seemed to lean closer, their warped wood groaning like laughter, the prizes dangling from the hook-stuffed bears with missing eyes. Rubber balls bloated with mold looked suddenly fresh, new, like they'd just been placed there for me. I forced myself to keep walking, legs shaky, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I knew if I bolted, I'd only make mistakes. I had to keep to the route. Midway, rides, fence. I didn't dare look back until I reached the bumper cars. Their floor was a sheet of cracked metal, blackened from years of weather. The cars themselves sat motionless, some half toppled, others missing entirely. But the overhead lights flickered to life as I approached, buzzing faintly. My heart lurched. Another rule flashed in my mind. If you see lights on the Ferris wheel, do not look directly at them. It wasn't the Ferris wheel, but still, the fact that any light was working at all felt wrong. Wrong enough that my instincts told me to avert my gaze. I kept my eyes low, scanning the ground instead, stepping around shards of glass and warped bolts. The air smelled faintly of ozone, sharp and metallic, like the sting before a lightning strike. The silence broke with the screech of metal. One of the bumper cars slid an inch across the floor, then stopped. I squeezed the flashlight tighter, refusing to look up, refusing to break focus. Whatever game the park was playing, I wasn't giving it another chance. I passed the arena, quickening my steps until the lights faded behind me. My breath shook as I exhaled, the weight of unseen eyes still pressing down. By the time I reached the far end of the midway, I realized two things. First, the rules weren't just warnings. They were traps, disguised as instructions, each one protecting me from something hungry that wanted me to slip. And second, the park wasn't empty, it was alive. By the time I finished the first lap of the midway, my nerves were shredded. Every booth, every ride, felt like it had been holding its breath, waiting for me to slip. I forced myself to keep moving, to follow the route Miller had given me. But the thought gnawed at the back of my mind. Why? Why would anyone work here? Why would Miller stay? I needed answers. The patrol route circled back near the office, though I knew the rules said not to return until 3 a.m. still. The door glowed faintly under my flashlight, the only building in the park that looked remotely alive. Curiosity tugged me closer. Just for a minute, I told myself, just to see. The knob turned easily, and I slipped inside. The office was empty. Miller's thermos sat on the desk, but he was nowhere to be found. The air smelled faintly of cigarettes and dust, like the room had been sealed for decades. I shut the door behind me and turned my light toward the corkboard. That's when I noticed the papers. They weren't random postings or old memos. They were reports, dozens of them, pinned in uneven rows, yellowed edges curling. Each one was stamped with the same logo, Hollow Pines Amusements, Safety Division. I stepped closer, skimming the faded ink. The first report I read was dated August 14th, 1987. It described a guest incident on the carousel. A child had gone missing mid. Witnesses claimed the horse she was sitting on wasn't the same when the ride stopped. The family insisted the horse was new, its paint too fresh, its smile too wide. Security searched the grounds, but the girl was never found. I swallowed hard and pulled down another report, this one from 1992. A night guard named Ellis failed to complete his patrol route. His body was discovered at dawn near the Ferris wheel, eyes burned out, skin blistered, as though he'd stared too long into a spotlight. The Ferris wheel hadn't been connected to power in years. My stomach churned. Every report was like that. Guests disappearing, employees breaking rules that didn't make sense until you saw the consequences. Some notes weren't even official, handwritten scraps pinned between the typed reports. Don't whistle in the park. It whistles back. If the prizes look new, don't touch them. The rides don't want to be empty. My pulse hammered as I flipped through more. Each scrap sounded paranoid, frantic, but together they painted a picture. The park wasn't just abandoned. It was possessed by something that refused to let go. I shoved the papers back against the corkboard, my hand shaking. A drawer on the desk caught my eye. It was locked, but the filing cabinet wasn't. I tugged it open, the metal shrieking in the quiet. Inside were folders, thick ones, each with a name written on the tab. Most were night guards. Each folder held the same pattern, a short employment form, a photo clipped to the corner, then a report stamped terminated. Some had police records tucked inside, others just ended with notes like failed to return at dawn or did not answer roll call. I found one labeled Miller. I hesitated, then slid it out. The photo was him, younger but unmistakable. The form listed his hire date as 1995. The termination stamp was already across the last page, dated 1996. My throat went dry. Miller had been terminated nearly 30 years ago. The office creaked suddenly, the sound of footsteps shifting on old floorboards. I snapped the folder shut, heart leaping into my throat. Miller, I whispered, though I knew the rule. No one here should know my name. No one here should answer. The sound stopped. I shoved the folder back, hands trembling, and closed the cabinet. My mind reeled. If Miller was terminated, what exactly had been sitting across from me tonight? I backed toward the door, but something on the desk caught my eye. A VHS tape, unlabeled, dust coating its surface. I slipped it into my pocket without thinking. When I stepped outside again, the night air felt heavier, more suffocating. The rides loomed like predators in the dark. I forced myself back onto the patrol path, though my focus was gone. All I could think about were the files. The missing guard, the stamped word, terminated. My flashlight beam swept across the funhouse as I passed. The mirrors inside reflected back twisted slivers of light. For a moment, I thought I saw someone standing among them, watching me, a shape that looked like Miller, only younger. I hurried past, pulse pounding by the time I reached the outer fence. My jacket pocket felt unbearably heavy with the VHS tape. Part of me wanted to smash it, to throw it into the weeds and pretend I'd never seen it. But another part needed to know what was on it. Maybe it held answers. Maybe it held proof that what I was seeing wasn't just in my head. I told myself I'd wait until morning, wait until the whistle, just like the rules said. Then I'd find a way to play the tape. But deep down, I already knew. The park wasn't going to let me wait. The fence line was quiet, too quiet. My flashlight traced the chain link as I walked, weeds pushing through cracks in the pavement. Beyond the fence stretched woods dark, still, endless. The park seemed to bleed into them, like the trees themselves had grown around its borders to keep it trapped. For a few minutes, nothing happened, just my boots crunching gravel, the beam of light cutting across rusted posts. My heartbeat began to settle, though the unease never left. Then I heard the Ferris wheel. It wasn't the creak of old metal swaying in the wind. It was the grind of gears, the hum of machinery powering up. My chest tightened as I turned toward it. The wheel loomed above the trees, skeletal against the stars, and yet its lights flickered on. First one spoke, then another, until the entire circle glowed with pale, electric brilliance. The cabins swayed as though riders had just climbed in. The air buzzed with energy, sharp and wrong. The rule screamed in my head. If you see lights on the Ferris wheel, do not look directly at them. Keep walking. I forced my eyes down, staring at the ground. My flashlight beam jittered as my hands trembled. Every instinct wanted me to look, to confirm what I was hearing. The hum grew louder. The wheel groaned, turning, impossibly smooth. My peripheral vision caught flashes of brightness, streaks of motion. I clenched my jaw, kept walking, kept my gaze fixed low. Then someone laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not menacing. A simple, joyful laugh, the kind you'd hear from a child seeing the world from above for the first time. It echoed across the empty park, ringing with delight. My chest ached. Every muscle screamed to look, to prove I wasn't alone. My eyes burned as I fought against it, the temptation clawing into my skull. Another laugh joined the first, then another. Soon the air was filled with voices, children, adults, whole families cheering as the Ferris wheel turned. I bit down hard on my lip, blood filling my mouth. Don't look, don't look. The air shifted. The laughter warped. What had begun as joy twisted into something else, high-pitched shrieks, distorted cheers, voices bending like tape warping in a player. My stomach lurched as the chorus grew, overlapping, pressing against my skull until it felt like my head would split. Look, a voice whispered, right above me. I broke, my eyes flicked up. For a heartbeat, the world froze. The Ferris wheel blazed with impossible light, brighter than the sun, brighter than fire. The cabins spun, each one filled with writhing shadows. Figures pressed against the glass, their faces smeared into grotesque masks of joy, eyes too wide, mouths stretching far beyond what should be possible. They waved at me, hundreds of hands slapping glass in unison. The light seared my vision. I staggered, dropping the flashlight, clutching my face as pain ripped through my skull. My eyes felt like they were boiling in their sockets. I hit the ground, rolling onto my side, screaming without sound. The air roared with laughter, voices clawing inside my head, pulling me upward. My body lifted, just slightly, as if unseen hands were dragging me toward the wheel. Through the haze of pain, one thought cut through. I broke the rule. I forced my eyes shut, clawing at the pavement, dragging myself forward inch by inch. The gravel tore at my palms, blood mixing with dirt. Every movement felt like pulling against gravity itself. The laughter reached a fever pitch, the Ferris wheel grinding faster, light strobing against my closed eyelids. My body rose again, weightless, feet leaving the ground. I dug my nails into the pavement, anchoring myself with raw desperation. Ride, the voices screamed. Ride with us. I don't know how long I fought. Seconds, minutes. My body felt stretched, like something was tearing me from myself. My chest burned, my eyes throbbed, and just when I thought I would be ripped away, a whistle blew sharp, piercing, cutting through the cacophony like a blade. The laughter stopped. The weight vanished. My body dropped back to the ground with a sickening thud, lungs sucking in air like I'd been drowning. When I dared to open my eyes, the lights were gone. The wheels stood still, dead and rusted once more. But my vision was ruined, blurred, painful. Every blink sent sparks of white across my sight. My reflection in a shard of glass near the fence showed blood trickling from my eyes, staining my cheeks. I staggered to my feet, swaying, the world tilting beneath me. The rules had saved me again, but not without cost. I retrieved my flashlight with shaking hands. Its beam fractured through the fog of my damaged vision. I could barely see more than a few feet ahead, and yet, even through the blur, I knew I wasn't alone. Shapes moved along the midway, too many to count. Shadows with too long limbs, swaying as though riding an invisible rhythm. They didn't come closer, not yet, but I knew they had seen me break the rule. The park was awake now, and it wanted me. I stumbled back toward the office, vision swimming, every step a blur of pain and shadows. My eyes burned, blood drying on my cheeks, but I didn't care. I just needed Miller. He had answers, he had two. The office door loomed ahead, its weak bulb flickering. I pushed it open and staggered inside. Miller was there, sitting behind the desk as though he'd never left, thermos in hand, eyes fixed on me. "You looked," he said quietly. I froze. The words weren't a question. They were a statement. "You told me not to," I rasped. My voice cracked. "You knew what would happen." Miller set the thermos down and leaned forward. The shadows carved his face into sharp angles, his eyes glinting unnaturally in the dim light. "I told you the rules. You chose whether to follow them." Anger flared through the fear. "Why the hell didn't you stop me? You knew the wheel would light up." You knew his lips twitched, not into a smile, but something close, something cold. "Do you think you're the first to sit in that chair? The first to read those rules?" The air grew heavier. My stomach turned. Miller stood slowly, pushing back his chair. His movements were deliberate, practiced. This place doesn't survive on rust and memory alone. It needs attention. It needs caretakers. The words sank like a stone in my chest. Caretakers. He stepped closer. I could smell the smoke on his clothes, the faint metallic temps that clung to him. People like you. People desperate enough to take the job, stubborn enough to think they can survive it. Some don't. Most don't. But the park, it always finds a way to keep what it wants. I backed up, heart pounding. "And what about you?" Miller's expression hardened. For a moment, the age fell from his face, replaced by something sharper, hungrier. "I was hired, same as you. I followed the rules. I lasted longer than most, long enough to learn the truth." His voice lowered, almost reverent. "The rules aren't just warnings, they're rituals. Ways to feed the park without letting it feed on us completely." The room tilted. My knees nearly buckled. "You're helping it." He didn't deny it. "You bring people here," I whispered. "You give them the rules and wait to see who survives. You're not protecting anyone. You're offering them up." Miller's jaw tightened. "Better them than me." Silence choked the office. The flickering bulb above us buzzed like an insect about to die. For the first time since I'd started this job, the truth settled heavy in my chest. Miller wasn't a mentor. He wasn't a guardian. He was bait. The park had already claimed him years ago, stamped his file terminated. Now he was something else, a servant, tethered here to make sure the cycle never ended. My hands curled into fists. "I'm not like you." His gaze sharpened, a glint of pity or maybe amusement passing through. "You think you'll make it to morning?" "They all think that, until the park decides otherwise." Before I could respond, a sound rattled through the building. A low, metallic groan, followed by the faint scrape of wood against floorboards. My blood froze. The carousel, Even from here, I could hear it turning. Miller's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. It's starting early tonight. He reached into the desk drawer and pulled something out. A ring of old keys, jangling softly. He tossed them to me. Why, you'll need them, he interrupted. His voice was flat, resigned. One of the doors won't hold without a lock. You'll know which one. I stared at him, trying to read his face, but his expression was stone. Before I could ask anything else, he stepped past me, moving toward the door. Where are you going? I demanded. To remind the park I still belong to it, he said, without looking back. You'd better hope it believes you do too. Then he was gone, swallowed by the night. I stood alone in the office, the keys heavy in my palm, the sound of the carousel grinding in the distance. For the first time, I wondered if surviving the park meant becoming like Miller, living long enough to lose yourself to it, and if that was the case, was survival even worth it? The carousel's song carried across the midway, faint but steady. That warped music box melody didn't belong to any ride I remembered. It sounded stretched, slowed, each note dragging like something old and tired trying to sing through. A broken throat. The keys in my hand felt heavier by the second. Miller's words gnawed at me. You'll know which door. I left the office, flashlight beam cutting through the blur of my vision. Shapes shifted at the edges of the light. Long-limbed shadows twitching but never stepping fully into view. They were following me, waiting. The carousel's music grew louder as I approached. Its lights flickered weakly, bulbs sputtering, throwing fractured halos across the cracked pavement. The horses weren't still. They bobbed and strained against their poles, eyes rolling, teeth clacking as if trying to chew through metal. Rule 4 slammed into my memory. Never touch the horses on the carousel. If they move, run. They were moving. I backed away, pulse hammering. That's when I saw the door set into the side of the carousel platform. Almost hidden by peeling paint and rotting wood was a maintenance hatch, rusted, padlocked. The keys in my hand trembled. I knew. This was the door Miller meant. The carousel groaned, turning a full rotation. Horses jerking violently, as though straining toward me. The music sharpened, faster, more insistent. Shadows pressed closer around the perimeter, restless, hungry. If I ignored the door, I'd be overrun. If I opened it, I had no idea what waited below. My breath came in ragged gasps. The park wasn't giving me a choice. I fumbled with the keys, slipping them one by one into the lock. The fourth one clicked. The padlock dropped with a clang that echoed too loudly. The hatch creaked open, exhaling a gust of stale air that smelled of wet earth and something chemical, like old blood. I shined my flashlight down. A staircase descended into darkness, wooden steps, rotting, rails eaten away. The carousel shrieked behind me, horses slamming against their poles, sparks flying. The shadows closed in. I went down. The air grew colder with every step, damp soaking into my clothes. The music faded, replaced by whispers, hundreds of voices, overlapping, hushed, all speaking at once. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was pleading, desperate. The stairs ended in a wide chamber. My flashlight cut across brick walls, slick with moisture, iron pipes running like veins. And in the center a pit. It wasn't deep, maybe 6 feet, but inside were bones. Piles of them, stacked and shattered. Some still wearing scraps of uniforms like mine. Security badges, keys, radios. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The whispers grew louder, echoing from the pit itself. And then I saw them, faces in the darkness, half-formed, pressing against the air like it was glass. Dozens, hundreds. Eyes glowing faintly, mouths shaping silent screams. Every caretaker, every guard who hadn't made it out. The realization hit me with crushing force. This is where the park puts us when it's done. This is where Miller will end, where I'll end. The hatch above slammed shut. I spun, racing up the steps, pounding against the door. It didn't budge. My flashlight beam jittered wildly across the walls as the voices in the pit rose into a deafening chorus. I had two choices: stay here until they dragged me down into the bones, or break a rule. Rule 5. Never leave your post until your shift ends. The park decides when you're relieved. It was past 3 in the morning. Dawn was hours away, but the hatch wasn't opening, and the shadows were pressing closer, their hands reaching up from the pit. For the first time since I started, I made my choice. I broke the rule. Dropping the flashlight, I scrambled along the wall, fingers searching for another exit. My hands brushed against rusted hinges. Another door half hidden by mold and decay. No lock, this time just swollen wood. The whispers screamed as I shoved against it. Splinters tore into my palms, the wood groaning, cracking. The pit surged, shadows rising like smoke. Clawing toward me. With one last shove, the door burst open. Cold night air hit my face. I stumbled out into the trees, leaving the carousel's glow behind. The forest was wrong. Too still, but it wasn't the park. Not exactly. I had crossed a line. I had broken a rule, and now I didn't know if I was free, or if the park had simply let me go because it wanted me somewhere else. The forest swallowed me whole. Branches clawed at my arms as I stumbled through the undergrowth. Vision blurred, lungs burning. My only thought was distance, put as much of it between me and the park as possible. But the forest wasn't endless. After minutes or hours, it was impossible to tell, emerged onto a dirt road. The world was silent, moonlight spilling across gravel and weeds. For the first time that night, I let myself breathe. I was out. I'd broken the rule, abandoned my post, and yet I was alive. The park hadn't dragged me back. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe Miller was wrong. My relief lasted less than a minute. A glow appeared down the road, faint at first, then brighter. Headlights. I staggered into the middle of the path, waving my arms. A pickup truck slowed to a crawl, engine rumbling. The driver rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" he asked. His voice froze my blood. It was Miller, not the Miller from the office, with gray hair and tired eyes. This one looked younger, decades younger. His face smooth, his posture strong, but the eyes were the same hungry gleam. I stepped back, shaking my head. No, you're not real." He smiled faintly. "You're on the schedule now. You don't get to quit." The truck door creaked open. Behind him, in the cab, I saw shapes. Dozens of them. Guards in faded uniforms, eyes empty, mouths twitching in silent laughter. Caretakers. They pressed against the glass, crowding the cab until it bulged, as if the truck itself could barely contain them. I turned and ran. The forest warped around me, trees bending, path twisting. My footsteps echoed too loudly, repeating like I was running in circles. The air thickened, heavy with the smell of rust and ozone. And then, ahead of me, I saw it, the gate. The rusted arch of the amusement park's entrance rose from the ground, like a gravestone. The sign above it flickered to life. Letters glowing one by one. "Welcome to Everfield Park. Open for nightly tours." I fell to my knees, breath ragged, tears stinging my ruined eyes. The park hadn't let me escape. It never would. The forest, the road, even Miller was all part of it. I was still inside. The rules hadn't saved me. Breaking them hadn't freed me. I understood, finally, what Miller had meant. The park doesn't need caretakers to protect it. It needs caretakers to keep its story alive, to keep the cycle turning. Somewhere behind me, the carousel's music started again, slow, patient, waiting. I wiped the blood from my face and forced myself to stand, because whether I wanted it or not, my shift wasn't over. And deep down, I knew one night soon, I wouldn't be walking the patrol anymore. I'd be one of the rides, waiting for the next fool to follow the rules.